As three rail companies, three rail operators, South Western Railway, C2C, and Greater Anglia, are about to be renationalised, the, the reality kicks in that rail fares are not going to be lower, they're actually going to be higher. By next autumn, these three operators will join the ranks of LNER, Northern and ScotRail, as the government fulfills its pledge under the Passenger Railway Services Public Ownership Act of 2024 to bring these franchises back under public control as contracts expire, creating a new arm's-length body, Great British Railways, GBR, to oversee services and eventually infrastructure. Renationalisation promises to address chronic inefficiencies, delays, and the oft-lamented fragmentation of British railways, a legacy of 1990s privatisation, and critics of the current system cite its uneven performance, financial inefficiency, and the profiteering of private firms at the taxpayer's expense. But unless the government brings the actual real infrastructure, the trains themselves, the carriages, into the same ownership, which isn't the case, then it's simply a matter of playing with pennies. And what does this mean? What does this renationalisation mean for passengers? Well, not very much if you're looking for cheaper seats. I'm off on a train today down to Oxford, and the ticketing is simply absurd. Once I actually got my ticket through the train line and tried to print it off, I realised I had no idea what it was talking about. And in addition, the train line service, this app, doesn't work anyway. It is maddening. All this hullabaloo about improvements and efficiency. It's just a change in nomenclature, and to no advantage to me at all, or to any other railway passenger. The Transport Secretary, the previous Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, and the new one, Heidi Alexander, have tempered expectations, reminding us that rail fares will rise by 4.6 in March 2025, the lowest increase in 3 years, but still an increase. And what does it offer? Not reliability so far. Ms. Alexander argues that public ownership should be about reliability and efficiency, not about undercutting prices. Well, then she needs to make sure that all the trains run on time, and that and that tickets are comprehensible. To paraphrase her, people are willing to pay more if services run on time. Well, yeah, and if the tickets that you get give you a sense of security when you're going to the station. But I don't know whether I'm going to spend most of the day fighting to see whether or not my return ticket works. This idea that people are prepared to pay more if the stuff works, yeah, it's a bold claim for anybody who's ever tried commuting on a rainy Monday, rainy Thursday, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. If you don't have that security when you enter the train station, this is all smoke and mirrors, isn't it? The elephant in the room is the cost, but there's also a hyena giggling in the corner about reliability and about whether the whole thing is makes any sense. Renationalisation might save £150 million annually in franchise fees, but it won't magically reverse decades of underinvestment. And it's not just the underinvestment, it's the decades of chaos. And rail partners representing private train companies insist that simply changing who runs the trains won't solve the railway's deep-seated problems. They argue that investment is critical for affordability, and Labour's plan, while a corrective, is only half a solution. Why are we wasting so much money on HS2 when we can't make the ordinary train network work reliably? Public ownership might reduce some of the inefficiencies as seen with LNER, but staff shortages no longer cause cancellations in LNER, but the system still doesn't run reliably. It's a small success, but it's not enough to justify the greater chaos of change. Labour faces a precarious balancing act. Set fares too low and railways risk a death spiral of declining service. Raise them too high and you alienate passengers, many of whom already find rail unaffordable and have either given up entirely, don't move, or they've found different ways of getting around the country. Commuters in Greater Anglia's network, for instance, shell out thousands annually for journeys often marred by delays. Why are you paying to stand in a crowded and late train? Renationalisation without fare reform risks being a cosmetic change, more PR than practical relief. And fare reform is something that could be effected like that. Because rail privatisation has largely failed, and the fragmented system has seen operators prioritising short-term profits over long-term infrastructure improvements, and the pandemic exposed the system's flaws as ridership has plummeted. Taxpayers have borne the brunt of financial risks, essentially renationalising rail without the perks of any control. So why bother renationalising? Renationalising, Labour argues, offers long-term benefits, a more unified system under GBR, less waste, greater accountability. But I'm not sure it's actually going to necessarily provide better journeys. It's not a panacea. Without significant capital investment, without gaining control of the rolling stock, renationalisation cannot fix the outdated infrastructure, the overcrowded trains, the strike-ridden schedules, the chaos of ticketing. Labour's plans have stirred an ideological debate. Conservatives label renationalisation as an outdated, costly leftist experiment. Labour counters that it corrects a privatisation experiment that has gone wrong. And the ideological clash distracts from the practical reality, that is, that Britain's railways need comprehensive reform, including fare restructuring, infrastructure upgrades, and better labour relations. Renationalising is a step forward, but it's not a silver bullet, without taking control of the rolling stock, without taking control of the carriages and the actual trains. And simply to buy those back would probably cost a significant portion of the money being wasted on HS2. It addresses ownership, this renationalisation thing, but not affordability. Labour must convince passengers that public ownership will yield tangible improvements unless they face fare hikes as yet another instance of paying more for less. And it's not just the stuff in the on the train which matters. Even getting to the train, buying a newspaper at the shop, which is surly and often not open. You know, there used to be a time when everything was owned by the same company, when everything was national, when you could rely on the possibility of getting a tea, getting a paper, and getting a seat. Now you can't rely on any of those, and your journey is going to cost so much more than it would cost in any other part of Europe, or indeed beyond Europe. Trains in Ukraine are incredibly cheap, I understand. The railway's future depends on long-term investment and bold reform. Until then, passengers will continue to weigh their rail options against other modes of transport or none, assuming their train hasn't been cancelled, of course.